right, welcome back to A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles, where we prefer truth over narrative and principles over politics. And in this segment, I'm going to talk about the abortion debate, specifically as it relates to crisis pregnancy centers. Now, before I get into it, you know what to do. I need you to share this broadcast. Share it. Hit that share button. And if you haven't already subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Leave me some good reviews. Give me a 5-star rating. All that good stuff. I appreciate all of it, and it helps me out a lot. But without further ado, I just want to get into this. So you already know the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, I guess about a month ago at this point. And it's caused a lot of friction and debate nationally on abortion and laws regarding abortion. Now it's back to the states to decide how they will handle abortion. So because of this, crisis pregnancy centers have come under attack, even more so than they have in the past. Now, the pro-abortion crowd has always hated crisis pregnancy centers and other such organizations that help women who unexpectedly become pregnant. But I want to give you an example here. I wrote an article for Red State about this in their VIP section. And so Massachusetts City, actually there's a few cities, are trying to crack down on crisis pregnancy centers. And I'm going to get into a little bit of why this is happening. But in this particular story, what they're trying to do, and I think it's spelled Worcester, but I think it's probably pronounced Worcester or something like that. I don't know. I'm butchering the name of the city, but it doesn't matter. Now, there are a series of attacks being levied against crisis pregnancy centers. We saw Senator Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts railing against them, in the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision on Dobbs. And we're going to see a lot more of this. We've even seen people get violent. They've been vandalizing pro-life organizations, firebombing them. They haven't targeted people yet, but they're serious about this. They're big mad about this decision. But what they're trying to do in this particular case, and it's also happening in other Massachusetts cities like Somerville, East Hampton, Cambridge, and what they're trying to do is force these centers to provide abortion referrals. Now, mind you, these are pro-life organizations. Their entire reason for existing is to persuade mothers to keep their children, whether they put them up for adoption or they choose to raise them. That is the purpose of these organizations. They want to save the lives of the children in the mother's womb. So a city council member, and I'm probably butchering his first name, but I think it's Tu Nguyen, sponsored this proposal aimed at forcing crisis pregnancy centers to offer abortion referrals. So he said, quote, "These centers' tactics include telling lies about abortions, birth control, sexual health, talking about religion when that's not what you came for, and saying judgmental things about premarital sex, single parenting, queer folks, and BIPOC folks," he said. He said this during a July 19th city council meetings. He also said, quote, "They use intimidation tactics as well as delaying medical health care, and this is where we need to take a stance." And then he says, quote, "If these centers aren't deceptive, they have nothing to worry about." Now, here's the thing. They make these accusations a lot against crisis pregnancy centers, but they don't really go into detail, right? I mean, he said that they tell lies about abortions, but he doesn't actually give any specifics. He says they use, quote, intimidation tactics. Again, he provides no evidence, and he doesn't even give detail about what tactics these facilities are using. Now, the main complaint that I've seen from the pro-abortion crowd about crisis pregnancy centers is that they will use deceptive means to get women to come into the door, and so they can convince them not to have an abortion. Now, I've heard that before, and I'm sure there might be some who have done that. I'm willing to concede that. I'm sure that, not every single crisis pregnancy center is acting in a way that they would consider ethical. But there's no evidence that most or all of them are engaging in these deceptive practices. Sometimes I guess they'll on their website, they'll make it sound like they're an abortion provider when they really aren't. Women come into the door and then they convince them not to have an abortion. The vast majority of them are not doing this. As a matter of fact, the vast majority of them have specific rules against doing that. CareNet, which is a network of crisis pregnancy centers, if you want to be affiliated with them, you can't engage in these practices. So I seriously doubt the notion that most are doing this. You've got probably maybe a small number that have engaged in these practices, and they're trying to make it sound like all or most of them do, when that's not the case. They haven't proven that I've seen no compelling evidence that this is happening. Really, the real reason why pro-abortionists hate crisis pregnancy centers is because they cut into the profits of organizations like Planned Parenthood. They convince mothers not to abort their children. If you're pro-abortion, you can't have that. Now, I've written about this before. I mean, on the left, they used to be pro-choice. If you're pro-choice, you shouldn't care about the existence of crisis pregnancy centers. If they persuade mothers to keep their children and they make that conscious choice, you're pro-choice, so you should be okay with that. But nowadays, they're only pro-choice as long as that choice is having an abortion. That's really what they want to happen. It's why they're against laws requiring mothers to look at an ultrasound of their baby, for instance. Now, again, that shouldn't be an issue. If they look at an ultrasound, they say, you know what, I don't want to do this. They should be fine with that. They should be fine with the mother making a choice. But they're not anymore. They're pro-abortion, as in they want these mothers to abort their children. Now, I don't think they want all mothers to abort their children. That wouldn't make any sense. I'm not saying that. But for mothers who do become pregnant unexpectedly, they see that as a solution, as a birth control solution. So that's why you have these people in these Massachusetts cities trying to force pro-life centers to provide referrals to abortion. Now, there was a member of the council who disagreed. Let's see. Her name was Toomey. Kathleen M. Toomey. She's a member of the city council. And she argued that if there are pregnancy centers using deceptive practices, this should be referred to the Attorney General's office, that they should handle that. She said, quote, people have the right to free speech. Quote, it's not about abortion, it's about free speech. And as a council, we need to honor free speech. I'm not going to take away an agency's free speech. If they are deceptively advertising, then the Attorney General is the person to handle that case. So the First Amendment, we think of it as covering things that we say, but it also protects us from being compelled to say something that we don't want to say. The government can't force us to make statements or take positions that are in conflict with our values. Therefore, these centers, most of which are religiously based, should not be forced to promote abortion. I mean, you don't see them forcing Planned Parenthood to provide referrals to crisis pregnancy centers. If a woman walks into Planned Parenthood, gets the options for abortions and says, no, I don't want to do that. Can you refer me to another place who can help me? They're not going to do that. They're not doing that at all. Maybe some are, but I haven't heard of it. But she also, well, no, I won't go more into what she was saying. But that's the bottom line. You can't force somebody to say something that they don't want to say. So, I mean, I don't know how these rules are going to hold up in court. I mean, I would imagine that the Massachusetts Supreme Court is probably left-leaning, so it may hold up with them. I don't know if this will get to the Supreme Court level, but this is obviously a step that the pro-abortion crowd is taking to impede what these crisis pregnancy centers are doing. Now, let's get into why. I wrote another article on this. Why are they so afraid of crisis pregnancy centers? Because they're effective. That's why. Because they work. They accomplish what they set out to accomplish, and what they're setting out to accomplish is having fewer mothers terminating their pregnancies. So, according to the Charlotte Lozier Institute, quote, over 5 years from 2016 to 2020, the result of the dedicated compassionate care in U.S. PHCs, that's pregnancy help centers, is an estimated 828,131 lives saved, and millions of lives saved since the creation of PHCs over a half century ago. So these crisis pregnancy centers started cropping up in the late 60s, as states were passing moral laws allowing for abortion. And then, of course, in 1973, you got Roe v. Wade. So another fact sheet from the same institute, the Charlotte Lozier Institute, it said that in 2019, crisis pregnancy centers provided a lot of services. I'll just read a few of them off to you. 8 in 10 locations offer free ultrasounds. They have performed almost 500,000 free ultrasounds just in that 1 year. They've given out 731,884 free pregnancy tests. They offer STD testing. They have tens of thousands and even hundreds of thousands of parents attending parenting classes and prenatal education. So it's not just they're just there to talk people out of having abortions. They actually provide resources for these mothers, parenting classes. They also provide free products that mothers need: diapers, car seats, baby formula, all of that stuff. And it kind of flies in the face of the argument that people in the pro-abortion side make. They say, oh, well, you only care about the baby being born and you don't care about after that. No, these centers are there to provide ongoing support as these mothers raise their children. They also provide support for fathers too. It's not just for mothers. So yes, they do care for the baby after it is born. And realistically, that's the reason why the pro-abortion crowd hates them. One, because they're not pro-choice, they are pro-abortion. They want more abortions. Two, because these centers are very effective at helping mothers choose to keep their children. They also provide counseling for adoption. So if a mother knows that she's not in a position to raise her child, they're able to help her put the baby up for adoption and place it with a family that can care for that child. So they're doing God's work here. I mean, they're doing good work and they're saving lives. And what I've been saying is, now that Roe has been overturned, we need to protect these organizations. We need more of them, because there will be more mothers seeking help, especially since the overall debate on abortion isn't exactly going in the way the pro-abortion crowd would want. I mean, polling shows that most people want abortion to be allowed to a certain extent, like up to 15 weeks, but they want a lot of restrictions on it. I think that's going to even change even further towards the pro-life side, because it's becoming less possible to argue that you are not taking a life when you're performing an abortion. So I wanted to bring that up because I want more awareness about what these organizations do. They always need funding. They don't get state funding. They don't get federal funding like Planned Parenthood does. So they are at a disadvantage in that area. But even with that, they have managed to grow to a point where they're helping a lot of women. And a lot of people don't even know that these organizations exist. So as conservatives, we need to make sure that we're supporting them as much as possible. Let's get them as much attention as possible. Let's get them as many donations as possible, because they're providing a good service. And again, if you're pro-choice, you shouldn't care, because if they persuade mothers to keep their babies, that's not hurting you, is it? Right? That's the argument they always use. But again, most of them are pro-abortion, so they don't want women making that choice. So I'll leave it right there for right now. There will be more attacks on crisis pregnancy centers, so I'm sure I'll be talking about this again. But until then, I'll catch you on the other side.